ownership security, farmer knowledge, and credit accessibility also affecting cropping intensity. Addressing these factors can help optimize agricultural land use and enhance productivity in coastal areas. In conclusion, the increase in cropping intensity during the Kharif season presents an opportunity to boost food production and farmer income. However, challenges such as fallow land persistence and inefficiencies need urgent attention. Key recommendation includes strengthening farmer training and extension services to promote modern agricultural practices, encouraging crop diversification and sustainable land use to maintain soil fertility and productivity, expanding access to affordable credit and irrigation technology to ensure more farmers can invest in year-round cropping, and finally, further research to explore ways of maximizing fallow land, utilizing and improving land productivity. Finally, we appreciate the availability of open access data from Google Earth Engine and Sentinel-2A. No external funding was received for this study, and all team members have contributed to data analysis, interpretation, and manuscript preparation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sabdi, for presenting an interesting study using the remote sensing. If you have any clarification question, you can ask.
I think you will be audible.
Yeah, you can ask. It's a small room.
Okay, I'm introducing Mr. Silas Side from Department of Economics, University of Chicago. In your paper, actually, the title was Analyzing Cropping Intensity of Different Cropping Seasons. Yeah. So the word cropping intensity you used 3 or 4 times maybe in your presentation. Yes. So it might be better if you can make a slide of cropping intensity. Actually, what is cropping intensity? If you can define in the presentation, it might be better for the audience or any other else. So it might be a recommendation. You can ignore it or you can add it.
Thank you. Nice session.
Okay, you can just I welcome clarification question this time. We can discuss more in the discussion part, okay? And something you can answer later. We'd like to move to the third presentation. It is climate variability and its impact on food consumption and expenditure in rural Bangladesh. This paper will be presented by Sudipta Roy, who is the research associate.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sudipta Roy, a research associate working at SAEC, and my topic is climate variability and its impact on food consumption and expenditure in rural Bangladesh. So if I just go over the background for a short period, like the extreme events like rising temperature, droughts, floods, cyclones actually reduce agriculture productivity. And low-income countries, especially in Asia and Africa, are most vulnerable to food insecurity. And the COVID-19 pandemic actually further worsened food access, like pushing millions of people into acute hunger. So since it's based on Bangladesh, let me go over Bangladesh for a bit. Like Bangladesh has around 7,000 rivers, canals, and streams, and it spans a total of approximately 22,115 kilometers. And given its unexpectedly diverse physiographical characteristics, the country is actually increasingly vulnerable to risk and uncertainties from climate change. And if I point out, like according to the Global Climate Change Index, Bangladesh actually ranks 7th, according to the most climate vulnerable country. And coastal areas in particular actually serve as critical hotspots for destruction by cyclones, and the increasing frequency intensity of extreme climate events are actually devastating livelihoods by causing extensive crop damage and even forcing affected individuals to reduce their food intake or even face starvation. And 40% of southern Bangladesh waterline could actually be submerged with 0.65 meter sea level rise. However, prolonged severe and regular floods actually in Bangladesh actually contribute to arable highland and nutrient-rich alluvial soil, which actually support high agricultural yields. But however, prolonged and severe recurrent flooding actually can lead to extensive damage to crops, as well as significant disruptions to life and livelihoods. So what what I actually tried to do in this study, this was actually part of my master's thesis. I tried to examine the relationship between climate variability and household food consumption and food expenditure patterns in rural Bangladesh, like focusing on how climate change and extreme weather events actually affect the consumption and expenditure of cereals and pulses in particular within the rural households. This is a bit of the literature review I have done. I will actually not be going through all of them due to time shortage. This is like the declining crop yields due to climate change. Like in northwestern Bangladesh, climate change actually have reduced rice yields, including BD28, BD29, BD58, according to Bonurizama during 2019 published paper. Even if we look at global evidence of climate shocks and food security, we will actually see like, for example, take Vietnam. Vietnam's households actually have been affected by storms, experiencing a 1.5% drop in their consumption levels. Moving on, if I look at Bangladesh, Bangladesh post cyclone actually impacts increased meal consumption vulnerability by 9 to 14%. And in the floods during the 2014 and other extreme events, significantly disrupted household food security. So how is this study different? It focused on the broader food consumption perspective. Like unlike previous studies that mainly focus on cereals, this study also tried to incorporate pulses, which are actually in the rural households. It's the second most essential food source. It incorporated advanced methodology like using difference and difference method for using for causal analysis, and for regional disaster-based classification, I actually use the emergency events database, which is formerly known as EMDAT database. So the data from BIHS, I have used the data from BIHS, Bangladesh Integrated Household Survey, which is run by International Food Policy Research Institute, IFRI. The study has that survey has been done in 3 years, 2011 to 12, 2015, and 2018-19. And from this data set, I actually have used total of 14,980 observations, which each year accounting for 4,994 houses. As I said before, on the emergency event database, so I actually categorize them, mainly the floods and storms, into this was according to the districts were actually categorized according to this, like low exposure, like the district has been affected from 2000 to 2020, like 0 to 5 times, there would be low exposure, and consecutively like medium exposure 6 to 11, and medium high exposure would be 12 to 18. I actually took this from another study for using this methodology. And let me go over the variables, a bit of it. So I use I actually have 6 independent dependent variables here, like the cereal consumption, and pulse consumption, which is like how much of the cereals and pulses usually the households consumed in the last 7 days, and how much they have been spending from the external sources while they consume from the cereal and pulses, and how much they actually purchase beyond their household production. Like in the BIHS data set, the most of the households are from the farm households. So how much they consume from other households, and I have taken other variables like farm size, gender, age, family size, etc. I have also incorporated dependency ratio, sanitary latrine access, etc. So the difference approach is used here. As I mentioned before, this is the my model. This is my other models, which is basically the serial. I'm just actually trying to observe how much the serials, as I mentioned before in the variable section. So the null hypothesis is like how much household cereals and pulse consumption is at the statistically significant at various confidence levels, suggesting that climate variability actually impact household consumption of these food items actually. These are some of the descriptive statistics I have found out. I will not be going much through all of them, but I want to mention this here, like the emergency event from that emergency event database, like the highly exposed flood affected districts were 13 from 2000 to 2022, and storm affected were 7, which is basically cyclones usually. And the medium exposure was 27 of them were exposed to flood affected districts, and 30 of them actually incorporated medium exposure and the high exposure districts for this study here. These are some of the empirical results I have found from the impact of floods on cereals specifically. Like we observed in the long run, the results do not actually show some significant effect. However, for the short run, we actually find that the model actually significantly for cereal consumption quantity is actually negative. It suggests that cereal consumption is decreased in flood affected areas relative to the control areas for difference method. And it actually in cereal purchase was positive, so indicating a notable decrease in cereal purchase in flood affected districts. And the defense coefficient for cereal consumption expenditure, which was like the households spend more, is also positive here. This actually indicated that flood affected districts spent significantly more on cereals during the period relative to control areas. For the short run during 2015 to 19, we found that the flood exposed households actually significantly increased cereal consumption by 36%. And for the cereal purchase, it was negative, that indicating the household actually consumed less from purchased households. Moving on, was the I found the results for impact of flood on the pulses. And from the long run, we found that the flood significantly increased actually the pulse consumption by 9%. In terms of pulse purchases, it also resulted in a significant 5% increase, and floods led to a substantial 29% increase in pulse expenditure. This was for the long run, though. And for the short run, we also found that the DD per term is actually positive, but the floods did not significantly affect household pass consumption purchase during this period. Moving on, I have a bit of short time here, so I'll try to wrap this up. Uh, these are the impact of also on purchase. This for storms on cereals. These are the results I found out. Uh, these are the impact of storms on the pulses. I will actually move on to the discussion station so I can wrap this up. So larger firm sizes are actually associated with reduced reliance on market purchase and expenditures. So while increasing cereal consumption, a finding which is consistent with Rahman and Anik, I found out, which demonstrated that farm size directly influences self-sufficiency in cereal production. And in the short term, which I found out that floods significantly reduce cereal consumption, reflecting barriers to meeting the usual consumption of the households levels in the flood affected districts. This actually aligns with previous studies. And for the 2015-19 period, we observed that flood exposed household increased cereal consumption while significantly reducing purchases and expenditures. So higher income positively actually influence cereal consumption, supporting the argument from previous studies. In the long run, I found out that increased pulse consumption and purchases and expenditures, which actually suggest a shift towards dietary diversification, I would say, and actually increased reliant on nutrient dense food. These findings actually align with previous some studies. And I also have found a significant positive association of larger households with pulse outcomes. Further, it supports the importance of actually the household size in determining how much the food is the household's demand. And moving on, for the long-term incidental storms, this actually did not significantly affect cereal consumption purchase, but actually reduced their expenditure by 15%. So the overall reduction in expenditure may reflect adaptive strategies, such as like substituting cereal with less expensive alternatives or reliance on stored grains. And larger how the short term outlook for the storms, this actually increased the which I actually went over before. Uh, some of the recommendations I would suggest, like expand the rural infrastructure and the electricity access, also encourage the dietary diversity, and expand social protection programs so households would be they get like cash transfers to help during this climate change events, extreme events, like subsidize agriculture inputs to help flood affected farmers recover, and also promote climate resilient farming, like crops which are resilient to this production so that the households can do better and improve their financial resilience, and improve education awareness, which I actually saw in my study, which I actually forgot to mention. Like literate households actually consume more pulses and actually have better food security. So they will have better disaster preparedness training to actually help families adapt to climate shocks. So this is my presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Philip. Very nice presentation. So, is there any clarification question? If not, we'd like to move for our last but not the least. The presentation will be made by Mahajabin Rashid Namisa on effects of remittance on dietary diversity and food security, evidence from ACE 2022.
Hello everyone, this is Mahzabin Rashid Lamisha. And the paper I'm presenting today is the effects of remittance on dietary diversity and food security, evidence from HIAS 2022. So the study that I'm presenting here, so this examines the relationship between remittance received and dietary habits in Bangladesh. So we have used the household income and expenditure dataset of the recent dataset that is published in 2022, and this study examines the causal effect that remittance has on household dietary diversity and food security. And the background and motivation for this paper is mainly the fact that remittance has impact on almost all the aspects of a recipient household. So we are aiming here to explore what integrated relationship it has with two of the very critical indicators of nutritional well-being, that is dietary diversity and food security. So by dietary diversity, we refer to the variety of food consumed or the variety of food that has in a household's diet. And another aspect was food security. So food security ensures that the sufficient nutritious foods are available in the diet of a household. So globally, the food insecurity is an issue that is increasing or have a big impact on nutrition. And at the same time, Bangladesh is also suffering from food scarcity and malnutritional challenges. And Bangladesh is one of those countries which the economy is largely dependent on remittance. So I wanted to explore if remittance has any significant impact on these two of the very important nutritional well-being related indicators. So the research question that I have explored in this paper is, does receiving remittance impact household level dietary decision and food security? So we have analyzed household level data to check the dietary pattern and food security indicators. And from the previous literature, we have seen that there are papers on Bangladesh that have found that remittances have been an essential source of income, and that impacts all the decision making of a household. And from other studies of Sri Lanka and other countries, we have found that remittance positively impact food diversity, and also the fact that at times remittance increases the food expenditure, but the expenditure is on junk foods or the type of foods that not very nutritional for any individual. So we have found that there is no available literature on Bangladesh that explores the impact of remittance on food security and dietary diversity. So that's where we have conducted our work. So as I've already mentioned, we have used the HIAS 2022 data, and we also for this data had this food security questionnaire by Food Agriculture Organization about the food security. So we have employed that data set, that questionnaire for our data. So the household dietary diversity score. So for this, we have taken the food questionnaire of HIAS data, where there are 14 days of data monitored, and for each group, we assigned a score of 1 if that food group is consumed. So from all the food that were mentioned in the data set, we first categorized them into 14 categories, for 12 categories, and then if this food has been consumed in last 14 days, we have scored 1, and if not 0. And then from the total, we have taken the average and the 14 days average, and then we have obtained the final household dietary diversity score indicator. We have also tried to do a PCA analysis here, but then the household dietary diversity score came as negative as well, which shouldn't be the case. So then we took normal average. And for developing food insecurity experience scale module, we use the Indonesian module here of the FAO, and we evaluated the responses from the question, and then we categorized them into 3 categories. One is mild food security, when the response was yes to question 1, 2, 3, moderate if the response was yes to 4, 5, 6, and severe if the response was yes to question 7 and 8. And then we have categorized them into 3 categories: mild, moderate, and severe. So this is the summary of HEDS and FIS, and one of the important and also interesting finding is that there are mildly food insecure household and at the same time severely food insecure household, but there are no moderate level of food insecure household from this data set. And at the same time, we have found no households that have all the 12 dietary composed, all the 12 food groups available in their diet. And this is the descriptive statistics. We have also done descriptive statistics based on remittance receiving household and non-receiving household to check the difference. I won't be getting into the detail here. So the steps of econometric analysis. So we first did a profit analysis and then an average marginal effect analysis to check how the predictor variables are impacting the probability of the household receiving remittance. And then we did the Hickman selection model to address the selection bias, and then the propensity score matching, which was our main methodology. And from the propensity score matching, the ATE and ATT estimation, and we had some imbalance in the property. So to satisfy the balancing property, we have also employed Python. So I'll be getting into the detail here. So we have done the profit analysis first, and we have found that this data set, we found that it was robust. And at the same time, we have also, there are some interesting findings here, like larger households have more probability of migrating. So it probably, even so we found that it implies that households that have larger have more members or more family members, those families have this tendency to migrate, or one of the family members to migrate. At the same time, we have found where the in families where earning members are more, they are the receiving remittance, the probability of receiving remittance is lesser. So this also implies that when people have enough opportunity to get a job in Bangladesh or in their country, the tendency to migrate to other country usually decreases. And we also did the average marginal analysis. So this was also in sync with our profit finding. And then we did the propensity score matching. So as you can see from this, that there was a lack of balancing in the analysis. So that's why we employed the Python in the again. Since we run the first analysis on data, so then we employed Python. So from our result, we found that households that receive remittance experience an increase in average household dietary diversity, and at the same time, they are likely to be less food insecure. And our ATT estimation for household dietary diversity score shows that the ATT value, we first did a nearest neighborhood matching, and then we did the kernel matching. Since there was a lack of balancing, so we did multiple matching to check if there is an issue with it. So we found that all the value are in sync, that when we did the nearest neighborhood matching, the ATT value was 0.337. And when we did the kernel matching, it was 0.414. So on an average, both shows that the average household dietary diversity score has increased with and receiving of remittance. And the same for food insecurity. When we did the nearest neighborhood matching and when we did the kernel matching, the both results are in sync, and both has showed that there is a decrease in household food insecurity between the treated and compared group when they receive remittance. So then we did the balancing property in Python. We used the indices flatten operation and to perform the propensity score matching. And then the flattened array of indices enabled us to construct a data set that pairs the treated units with their nearest matching control units. And then our findings remain consistent, and also the balancing property has been satisfied. So this is the table showing the balancing property. So there are multiple policy implications from here. One is that government policies regarding food security and nutrition needs to include or consider the impact of remittance. And at the same time, since remittance plays an important role in issues like food security, and also we also need to take this thing in our, we need to address that how when the households that receive remittance, mostly in rural area, since the number of rural households that receive remittance is higher, so it's important that the MFS or other their knowledge about MFS or how to receive the remittance and how to use it properly. Like our previous literature showed that there is a tendency to eat junk food more than to eat nutritious food. So to educate them more on it. So these are some of the important takeaways from here. Also, we have found that there's a negative correlation between earning members and remittance received. So from there, targeted intervention to increase local employment or employment in home country or increasing employment in Bangladesh is very important to make sure that our reliance on remittance decreases with time. So to conclude this from this study, we have found that remittance has a significant impact on both household dietary diversity and as well as food security. So since a varied diet is very important for nutritional well-being, so this study tried to find out how remittance can be used as a mechanism to improve the overall dietary diversity and household dietary diversity and food security of Bangladesh. Since remittance is an important player in our economy, so this is my finding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lamisha. Interesting presentation. And we are well maintaining our time, I think. So if is there any clarification question? Uh, if not, we'd like to move to our discussant, Dr. Bodrunesa Ahmed, to discuss about the papers on 4 papers. So I would like to request Dr. Bodrunesa to finish your discussion by 15 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. Good morning, everyone, and Assalamu alaikum. I will start by consecutively the paper has been presented. Let me start with the paper by Dr. Jason. Let me start with the paper presented by Dr. Jason. Thank you, Jason, for your wonderful presentation to investigate the determinants influencing farmers' access to both institutional and non-institutional credit in India. I have a few comments based on your paper. Let me go through step by step. First one is the paper effectively employs profit model and OLS and blinder worker decomposition. That was quite nice. However, it could be beneficial to provide a more detailed justification for selecting these specific methods over alternatives, such as commonly used propensity score matching for causal inferences. My second point is that the paper relies on the 77th round of NSSO data, which is for the 2019. We all know, given potential economic shifts due to the recent policy changes or global disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, integrating more recent data or discussing possible impact of these changes in your model would strengthen the study relevances. My third point is addressing the endogeneity concern in your paper. The study assumed that land holding size and education influences credit access without discussing potential endogeneity. At the same time, reverse causality or omitted variable bias might influence your result. Using instrumented variable regression could help address this concern rather than simple Pobit and Oaxaca decompositions. Finally, the paper briefly discussed non-institutional credit sources, but I think a deeper analysis of why some farmers still prefer the credit them over the institutional credit despite higher interest rate could add valuable insight, including qualitative data or some case study might provide a richer understanding of farmer preferences in your analysis. So for the first paper, these are my observations. Let me go for the second paper presented by MD Nasimujjaman Sabri. My observations are, first one, the paper identify factor influences changes in cropping intensity. However, it would be valuable to include a deeper discussion on how socio-economic elements such as labor availability, input cost, and farmer financial condition contribute to the changes. There is no reflection of this social dimension in your paper. Secondly, the study mentions seasonal variation, but does not explicitly address how long-term climate change might impact cropping intensity, which is far more important in case of Bangladesh, including projection or a discussion on climate resilience strategies to strengthen the policy implication of the findings. Thirdly, the paper suggests increasing technical skill and financial access to farmers. However, further policy orientation recommendations such as government incentives for crop diversification or infrastructure improvement for irrigation would add to the practical value rather than simply going through the resilience models and others. Finally, the paper effectively presents findings but lack a dedicated section on study limitations. A discussion on data constraints, potential bias in remote sensing, classification, or challenges in survey responses would provide a more comprehensive perspective for future researchers. For the third paper presented by Sudipta Roy, thank you for the wonderful presentation. It's a nice and more practical topic set. Now, recent days based on how climate variability, specifically flood and storm influences household food consumption expenditure patterns in rural Bangladesh. My observations are, while the study effectively analyzed long-run and short-run effect of climate variability, a more in-depth discussion on potential future projections would strengthen the policy relevances. Because you have applied data from 2011 to 2019. So based on that, we might have expect some kind of future projections on climate volatility, further alter food expenditure pattern beyond 2019. My second point is that the research focuses on food consumption expenditure pattern, but does not explore whether climate shocks force households to reallocate resources from other essential needs, like education and healthcare. Including this perspective would provide a more comprehensive view of household vulnerability. At the same time, study examines only on cereals and pulse, which are critical dietary staples. That's true. But an exploration of the other food groups, such as protein, dietary, and vegetables, which are commonly consumed, would help provide a more comprehensive understanding of how climate variability affect overall dietary diversity, not only the simple dietary diversity. Furthermore, on the methodological aspect, I could suggest further validate the causal claim. I think the study could explore the test for parallel trend assumptions or explore alternative economic specification for the robust state for the analysis. Finally, the study categorized district by exposure level, but does not extensively analyze whether different regions experience varying intensity of food insecurity. A more disaggregated breakdown by district level vulnerability and adaptation strategy would enhance the study practical implications. For the fourth paper, the paper does a good job for stating the research objectives, but it could be benefit from a more precise and structured articulation of how remittance impact both dietary diversity and food security separately rather than summing them all together. Clarifying the specific mechanism by which remittances influence this factor would enhance the reader's understanding. For the methodological perspective, the PSM and the Heckman selection model is commendable. It helps understanding the selection bias. At the same time, there are some limitations of using this model. So we have to think about these limitations, such as unobserved heterogeneity or issues with common support. I think the researcher could think about the unobserved heterogeneity bias in the model and could mention some analysis based on that one. For the policy implications, it could further discuss the role of government initiative in improving financial literacy and access to remittance in rural areas, because government plays a vital role in rural areas for this kind of initiatives and dietary diversities. Expanding on how remittance flow can be leveraged for better nutrition and financial inclusion would add depth to the policy discussions. Most importantly, in the findings section, I found that the female-headed households are less likely to receive remittances. Female-headed households are less likely to receive remittances. That is a crucial point. I think a deeper understanding of the causes, such as culture or norms, employment pattern, or barriers to financial access for the women, would provide valuable insight and reinforce the policy recommendation for this paper. I finally thanks all the presenters for the nice presentation. These are my observations based on the paper. So you guys can think about whether it is relevant to your study or not, and could incorporate this one based on my clarification on this. Thank you so much.
Uh, Thank you very much, Dr. Bodolesa, for your very useful insights on these papers and giving some very effective suggestions. I hope our presenters took notes on this and if possible, you can revisit the paper to address these issues. You can also personally discuss with her if you don't understand anything and um, consequently you can address those in your paper. So I hope this fourth paper you found very interesting and therefore uh, I think you have some comments and questions among you. So I would like to open the floor for the audience for discussion. So, yes, please.
Thank you.
Is there any microphone? Please. Just introduce you and ask your question.
Thank you, Honorable Master, for giving me an opportunity. Myself, Fatala, I'm a graduate student of the Economics Department of the University. I have two questions to Vishal sir. Are there any interest rate disparities among financial institutions in India? And the other is many farmers tend to divert their loans to buy non-productive goods like household goods, repaying their old debts. What is the solutions regarding this? Thank you.
Okay. Next.
My question is to, I am Abdul Shaki, currently working as a research analyst at International Food Policy Research Institute. My question is to Dr. Isha. So, he perfectly analyzed how people are discriminated due to their religion or other aspects. But did you explore how this discrimination could be mitigated or minimized? That would be very helpful to know. And my next question is to Mr. Sabri. That, um, from your use sensing data, how did you determine that these lands are were cultivated and which lands were not? Was it given to the data set or did you find out by some methodology that is that
Okay, thank you very much. Please take notes of the question. We will come to you after that question session. So next, next question. Or you can just express your feelings about the paper if there is no question. And how did you like it? But just say something. It's a great opportunity for you, especially who are the undergrad graduate students or intern in different departments. So, how did you like this paper? You can just tell this. Yes, please.
My name is Jessica Chakraborty. I'm research assistant currently working in Stanford. My question is to Mr. Nasimus Zaman Sabdu. So why did you specifically choose Jhumki area for your research? Why not other places?
Okay, thank you. From the back side, anyone? Any question for Lamisha? And would you like to ask anything? Like you asked a question. That's it.
That was okay. That was the recommendation. Actually.
Okay, recommendation. Okay. Do you have any? we have actually time to discuss these things.
Like to convey some.
Okay.
I have promised to Lisa and so should we pass down? Why didn't you try DIU or something that based on like we know from 2011 to 2019 there are several cyclones and other floods. So we could identify those cyclones and based on that event we could do some event analysis or something like that. Uh, and to Lamisa, that when you used your remittance data, you use remittance and dependent variable in first regression and household data diversity and food insecurity as independent variables. So when you are finding like impact of remittance on dietary diversity or food insecurity, isn't it convenient to put those variables as dependent and remittance as the independent, and then finding out its impact on that variable? Yeah, that is.
Thank you again. If there is no more question, I would like to invite our presenters to answer the questions arising from the floor. First of all, I would like to welcome Dr. Jishan to respond to the questions.
Thank you. The question related to loan for the non-business purposes that we have. I mean, of course, I mean, if and that is not true for the Indian farmers only, that is true for people in general. Let's say I have applied for the education purposes, maybe for the, building my house, but the amount I receive sometimes people utilize in some other purpose other than the specific one we get. Okay. So one of the possible, way of doing this that we can disperse the loan in phases. If people is, I mean, farmers are, applying for longer loan, then it can be dispersed in phases, and there should be some more monitoring. But we are, facing the problem of monitoring due to the physical manpower or some corruption is involved. We do have the monitoring system, but the corruption is involved. We do, offer a part of, bribe to it, and then the system is, manipulated. I can share since we do have time, so I can share a small story of one panchayat, gram panchayat, uh, they request to the government to have 5 lakh of money so that they can have a big pond of water, so the farmers can get benefit of it. They receive the amount, they haven't done anything, and after 3 4 years, they again applied. Okay, the pond we got, and now 2 or 3 child are died, and there is some malaria thing, some disease are spreading. We need 5 7 lakhs extra so that we can fill that pond so that we can do it. Again, they got 5 7 lakh rupees and nothing happened. Okay, and the part of it is was offered to the officers that are coming for the monitoring thing over the period of time. So, I mean, this is it, what it is. Okay. So the question related to the discrimination, and I'll come to the second question because I forgot. I'll have to ask again. The question that is related to the discrimination, so the growth is, I mean, discrimination is everywhere, in every country. The faces are different. I mean, even if you go to US, you will find a bit of discrimination based on the color. In some other places, you will find based on the language. Some other is based on the religion, caste, color, blah blah blah. In India, we do have based on the caste, and it won't go overnight. Okay, as compared to the earlier years, it is decreasing over the period of time. It's good. People are getting educated, and education is one of the weapon that we can reduce the discrimination of any kind, and caste is one the exceptional one. So the education is the one. Not only the education and awareness, the government is providing the education to the SC, ST caste and minorities so that they also will be knowing their rights and the duties. And through the education, they are the part of the system. So earlier, let's say out of 100 officers, hardly one or two are from the scheduled castes or scheduled tribes. Now they do have the reservation of 27% in OBC and 12.5% for SC and SC. So now in the same room, we have, let's say, the 25, 30 officers from the backward caste. So now they do have the voice. It is changing, but it is taking time as compared to what it should be. But yeah, since they are now in the part of their contribution in the system is increasing, so over the time we are hoping that it will the reduce. And another point that I would like to make here is perception as well. Sometimes what happens, there is no discrimination, but I do perceive if I apply, I won't get it. Okay, not only for the SC/STs, the Muslims as well. I mean, there is the discrimination, but uh, there is a perception as well. I mean, I won't get the government job because I belong to the particular caste or community. I won't get this benefit because I belong to this. So that's why we don't apply. So if you're not applying, obviously you won't get. So instead of I mean, if this is there is the discrimination, but there is the perception as well. So it will take time, but it is decreasing over time. It's good to see this. I forgot the first question. If you can repeat, I can cover.
What is,
Related to the disparity, I forgot.
yes, are there any interest rate disparities among financial institutions that giving loans to the farmers? Interest rate disparities.
Interested, yeah. So the states like Haryana, Punjab, Maharashtra, they are farmers are more educated as compared to the states like Bihar, Orissa, Uttar Pradesh, and they are not aware of it. That's why if you take the percentage share of farmers in the final consumers prices also less because they don't know what is going on. So not only related to the accessibility of credit, everything. If you say, I mean, if you say, if you compare the Uttar Pradesh farmers with the South Indian farmers who are from the Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and Tamil Nadu. So you will see a significant difference in everything, not only the accessibility of credit, in everything. So, I mean, everywhere you will find some are doing good as compared to the others. So it's a part of system. But yes, there is a disparity. If you take the Haryana, Punjab, Maharashtra up to some extent, and the South Indian states like Telangana, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, they are doing well as compared to the states like Bihar, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Orissa, and Madhya Pradesh. They are kind of Bemaru states.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Disha. I think he clarified the questions that you have asked. So if there is no further clarification needed, I would like to go to Sabir. So,
Now, you have asked that how we have selected that cultivated or non-cultivated area. So, I have already mentioned in my presentation that we have used supervised classification methods in our study. First of all, we have go to the study area and took some training samples. Then we input the training sample in our data set. Then we have selected all the data set. And the next question was that why I selected Durga. Well, this study was done in 2021, and it was the part of my undergraduation degree. We have done some literature review, and we have found that cropping intensity is not well detected in some coastal areas of Bangladesh. And due to some constraint and other some issues, we have selected the Tumkubu Jala because the availability of data was easier for us. Thank you.
why the availability of data is here? Why the availability of data is here?
Because ma'am, in remote sensing, we have to look at the cloud of the area. So we have studied all the other places as well, but due to some cloud, we cannot look other data.
Okay, thank you, Sabir. Then I would like to invite Shudipro for responding on his questions.
And
my discussant, Dr. Burton and Sam, for their valuable insights. So I would go over some of the comments, like why did I choose cereals and pulses specifically? The PIG's data is actually the actually focus on the rural households, and like rural households mostly like on a year basis, as far as I have seen, like they actually consume most like the cereals, and the pulses are actually like the poor man's protein, I would say. So that is the reason I actually focus mainly on cereals and pulses. But I would definitely look forward like how it impacts other food items like proteins and other items. Like I would definitely explore that. And ma'am suggested using it going on to disaggregated breakdown. I definitely agree. I will look into that. And from Shakil bhai, I had a question like why did I use the DID? I actually thought of using a fixed effect and undergraduate as well. I actually wanted to see like in the VHS data did not have a harmonized data set for 2018-19. It had till 2015 and the 11 one. They had a harmonized data set which actually pointed out which district was affected, how much was the rainfall. But I did not actually find it for 2018. So actually, to see the impact till 2018, I actually that's why I use the emergency event database. But I would definitely look into if there is any view-based location. In that case, I would actually go in advice. Thank you for that.
Thank you. So, Namisha, if you would like to respond.
Thanks to the discussant for her remarks. I'm taking note of the thank you. And for this question, remittance was the treatment variable, and the household dietary diversity score and food insecurity was the outcome variables here. And there were covariates, for like social security program and household demographic characteristics. Those were used as covariates. Since I have run a PSF, so I have taken remittance as a different variable. I think I haven't made clear in my presentation, so there was a confusion. Thank you.
Uh, you have question? Yes. Okay, please.
Um, Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Kausar Islam. I'm from Economics Department of BU at my first year. My question is to Lamisha. I want to know the proportion of people who are dependent on the remittance in Bangladesh for their dietary or food security stuffs. And I also want to know the average amount of remittance they probably get, they have like, in their in their budget or in their daily monthly, how amount of amount they get. So that is the question. I can read it.
Okay, so we have two questions. First one was what's the proportion of budgeted use in that or diet?
In the proportion of population that
Getting the remittance.
depend on remittance.
Who are dependent on remittance in Bangladesh and in global.
Okay, so the data set that I have used was household income and expenditure survey. So there was no specific proportion in such mention, but the proportion of remittance received in the non-receiving household was the total household was 14,395, and remittance receiving household was a bit more than 12,000, and remittance non-receiving household and remittance receiving household was something around 2,000 and 2,200. I don't exactly remember the number. So that was the
You can guess this the population
that was-
percentage from
yes. So that since this is the national representative data,
Yeah.
that could be the proportion. And another question was how much like what's the amount of their budget they use in food or nutrition. Unfortunately, there was no money or budgetary wise the proportion was mentioned in the data set or in highest data. So what was it like is if this household receives remittance or not, and then what kind of food they use, or what kind of food they have consumed in last 14 days. Unit price. It was like that. So I didn't go into the unit price or making a total of it. Also, there was no, if I remember correctly, there was no mention of the total household income in that sense. There were expenditure-wise, household wealth-wise. It was like that. How much this household incomes, but I didn't make a total of this as well because that was a separate questionnaire. So I really don't have a straightforward answer to your question in that sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. But just for your understanding, the food consumption budgetary depends on the income level of the population. So the lower income level people and the rural household, almost 50% budgets or more than 50% budgets they use for food consumption. Okay. So when the income increases, the proportion on food consumption decreases. Okay. So the budget allocated in other aspects also. So for the rural households, they use most of the budgets for the food consumption. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for a lovely discussion. So I would like to make a very brief comments on the four presentations. First of all, Dr. Jishan, he presented a very interesting paper on credit accessibility in India. So it's particularly which state?
India as a whole.
India as a whole. Okay.
The whole data set was used.
Okay, the whole data set was utilized. And thank you for coming from all the way from yeah, it's our pleasure to have you here. Um, and yeah, it's interesting that we know the some in South Asia, some things are similar. In case of credit, like large farmers, small farmers, there are some discrimination between large farmer. We know that large farmers have greater accessibility to credit, and the small farmers have some complications in receiving credit, and that's why they depend on the non-formal institution a lot. But the unique thing for India, I think, like the caste, it's not exist in other South Asian countries, especially Bangladesh. So how caste affect the credit things and the minority group, as you said later on, that the perception of people also is a concern. Like they think that if they go to this institution, they may not get credit. So it's a interesting thing. Well, if government from government sides is sides, so is there any part of receiving credit for the low caste people or the minority group people? That is a
No such
no such issue. But whenever we saw some study, we find that the low caste people or the minority group, they are in the disadvantaged position of receiving credit. So this is interesting that what other factors really influencing of getting this credit and why this discrimination still exists, and what kind of policy government should take to minimize this discrepancy. So these things, I think, as India is a very multicultural country and geographically and culturally, so it may not be very easy to reduce all this discrimination, but state by state government can take something. Like in West Bengal, we saw some like there is a policy of Lokhi Bhandar, so that the female of the households they get money every month
Yes.
automatically, right?
In many other states, we do have like Karnataka.
Yeah.
If the female is the household head, and then the government will be providing a portion of ration.
And and it is irrespective of whether she is household head or not, they get this money. So this is a very it's a policy for reducing the gender discrimination of among in intra household level. So thank you for your paper. Sabbir, you have also presented a good paper. I understand that it is based on your undergrad study. That's why you couldn't manage data that big data, but this study would be more interesting if it is it can be seen over time changes, because usually the remote sensing data will give us good results if we can say see the over the year changes of the land use pattern and the cropping intensity. So I hope when you suggest that policy recommendation or further research, this kind of thing should be introduced at least 5 years later, 10 years later, what happened. What year you took, you 22 data is what. Maybe 5 years later, what changes have been made. Because some government programs like SAEC and other programs are introduced, especially in the coastal areas of Bangladesh, to increase the cropping intensity. So, and it's a government's priority also to increase the cropping intensity in coastal areas. So, we should see that if we can see the impact of this program, whether it is effective or not, we can use your remote sensing methodology. So you some of them I find this research interesting, but it's based on only 1 year, two cropping season. So we didn't generate too much policy implications from this. Like we know in almond season, Kharif season, almond rice is the obviously the crop farmers produce, and in Rabi maybe other crops. As cropping intensity is much lower in Rabi season, some high value crops can be introduced in this season as well. So yeah, I would like to request you to generate some more data in future, or develop some research that would be interesting to see. Sudipto, you also presented a very good research paper based on price data, OBI's data. So uh, that the climate variability, you say that you have mentioned that yield has reduced significantly. So whether the other, on the other hand, there are some measurements from the government side to reduce this climate variability, such as like highly climate resilient variety and other climate smart technologies that has introduced. So whether these technologies has really had some impact to reduce the climate variability and the impact on crop production. So that would be interesting to see in the long run. If further data has developed, or you can do some case study. That VA's data is like say data, but you can do some case study, just picking up some of the points of this study area, so we can see like what is the current status and the real impact in the field level of the climate variability. So some of the research that you can undertake in future. Lanisha also presented a very good research remittance. So all the households are rural households?
No,
No.
there was equal number of rural and
Okay, yeah. So did you measure separately rural and urban?
no, I
So that is can be a interesting thing if you can separate the rural household and urban household, and whether the effect of remittance are different between the rural and urban household. So that can be an interesting thing. And I know that there are some data limitation. You don't have income data. You don't have like actual data on some of the other variables. So, but still the the SDDS and FIAS are good to measure based on its data. So, and an overall comment for the presenters that please make some all the slides that visible. You don't need to present the slides that are not visible at all. So this is just a general comment. Uh, so with these comments, I would like to conclude my comments, but also like to thank Sanel for uh, keeping a session on agriculture, food security, and livelihood. And it's gave us an opportunity to discuss some of the papers related to agriculture. And thank you very much for inviting me as chair. I would like to thank my discussant, Dr. Bodulesa, for again her some useful insights on the papers, the key persons, the presenters of these sessions. I would like to thank all of them, the audience who are very patient to hearing all these research papers, and the SANEM people who are assisting and organizing this session very effectively. I would like to thank all of you and would like to conclude this session.
Request to hand over.
Oh, yeah, please. Sure.
He could be on the questions.
Huh?
Yes, members.
That's okay. Asha. Yes. So,